It was the kind of morning that felt full of possibilities, the kind that carried the scent of fresh coffee, new beginnings, and quiet curiosity. The office of Linton & Co. buzzed with the sound of keyboards clacking, printers humming, and whispered conversations spreading faster than morning gossip usually did. "Have you seen the new hire?" someone asked near the break room. "She's older than most of us," another voice replied. "Looks like she came from a library, not a business firm." But Grace didn't hear any of it. She was standing by her new desk, setting down her small leather bag that had clearly seen years of use, and arranging a single photo frame, a picture of a sunrise over calm water. Her movements were gentle, deliberate, as if she carried patience in her fingertips. She didn't seem rushed, and that alone made her stand out in a place where everyone always looked like they were racing against time. Grace was different. She didn't arrive in fancy heels or wear the latest fashion. Her gray skirt and white blouse looked neat but modest, the kind of outfit that said she valued comfort over style. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her smile soft and genuine appeared whenever someone accidentally made eye contact with her. Yet, she wasn't trying to make friends. She greeted everyone politely, took her seat quietly, and focused on learning the ropes. She didn't interrupt, didn't brag about past jobs, and didn't try to impress anyone. But there was something about her presence, calm, watchful, grounded, that made people take notice, even if they couldn't explain why. By noon, most of the staff had already formed opinions about her. "She's too quiet," said Clara, the head of client relations, tossing her hair and adjusting her expensive blazer. "Probably doesn't know much about the corporate world." Others laughed lightly, eager to agree with someone as confident as Clara. But while they speculated, Grace simply continued working, taking notes, organizing files, and studying every detail of how the office functioned. She noticed how some employees spoke kindly to their boss but snapped at the janitor. She observed how Clara smiled wide when the CEO walked by but rolled her eyes the second he left. She saw who helped others without being asked, and who only worked when someone was watching. When lunch came, Grace didn't join the group at the cafe across the street. Instead, she sat by the window with a small homemade sandwich wrapped in foil. Outside, the city buzzed with life, cars honking, people rushing, but inside, she seemed content with her quiet meal. Her eyes followed the reflection of her coworkers chatting and laughing as they passed by. Their words full of energy, but their hearts, she sensed, full of restlessness. Grace didn't envy them. She had been in busy offices before, in positions where power spoke louder than kindness. This time she wanted to see what happened when no one knew who she really was. Later that afternoon, her manager, Mr. Reeves, stopped by her desk. "You're settling in well, Ms. Grace?" he asked, flipping through a file. She nodded politely. "Yes, thank you. It's a nice place." He smiled, a little surprised by her calm tone. Most people are nervous their first day. Grace's lips curved in a small smile. "I've had a few first days," she replied simply. Something in her voice made him pause. There was quiet confidence there. Something earned, not borrowed, by the end of the day. The office lights dimmed, and most employees hurried out, eager to escape work. But Grace stayed behind for a few minutes, organizing papers and tidying her desk. When she finally stood and walked toward the exit, the security guard greeted her with a kind smile. "Long day, ma'am?" he asked. She nodded softly. "A learning one." As she stepped outside, the evening wind brushed against her face, carrying the faint hum of city traffic. She looked up at the tall building, its glass walls glowing with power and pride. Behind those walls, she knew, people often wore masks, masks of authority, of status, of importance. Grace smiled faintly to herself, her eyes steady and knowing. She wasn't there to be another employee. She was there to see the truth that lay beneath the surface, to learn what kind of people this company was built on. The office thought she was just another new hire, They didn't know that beneath her quiet presence was a woman who had seen the top and chosen to start again, not for money, but for meaning. And while others judged her by her clothes or her silence, Grace already knew, sooner or later. The truth always finds its way into the light. A week had passed since Grace joined the company, and the initial curiosity about her had begun to fade, replaced by something sharper: judgment. Her calm nature, which once drew polite curiosity, now seemed to irritate those who thrived on attention. Among them was Clara, the confident and glamorous employee who considered herself the heart of the office. Clara loved being noticed, the way her heels clicked across the floor, the way her laughter filled the air, the way people nodded eagerly when she spoke. To her, silence was weakness, and humility was invisible. Grace, with her quiet ways and modest clothes, seemed like the perfect target for her misplaced pride. It started subtly, a whispered comment here, a sarcastic smile there. The first time, it happened during a morning meeting, when Grace accidentally dropped her pen. Clara smirked and muttered loudly enough for others to hear, "Maybe she's not used to professional settings." A few laughed softly, unsure if they should join in. Grace only smiled faintly, picked up her pen, and continued taking notes. She didn't defend herself, didn't glare, didn't shrink. That quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need words, unsettled Clara even more. By midweek, the small jabs turned into open mockery. In the break room, when Grace offered to make coffee for everyone, Clara laughed. "Oh, you don't have to play house here, dear. We have machines for that." The others chuckled, though some looked uncomfortable. Grace didn't flinch. She poured herself a cup, thanked them politely, and left. Her calmness, her lack of reaction, seemed to make the mockery lose its satisfaction. But Clara wasn't done. One morning, Grace arrived early and found a small coffee spill on the shared desk near the window. Without a word, she grabbed a cloth and began cleaning. As she wiped the table, Clara entered with 2 colleagues and smirked. "Look at her," she said mockingly. "You'd think she's never worked in an office before. Maybe she thinks she's still a housekeeper." The laughter that followed echoed through the quiet space. Grace froze for a second, her hand still holding the cloth. She heard every word, but instead of anger, a calm sadness crossed her eyes. She finished cleaning, placed the cloth neatly aside, and turned to them with a soft smile. "It's okay," she said kindly. "A clean space makes it easier to work." Then she walked away. The room went silent. Clara rolled her eyes, but inside, something twisted. Guilt, maybe, though she'd never admit it. What no one knew, not even the manager, was that Grace had once sat behind large oak desks in skyscrapers twice as tall as this one. She had once led teams of dozens, made decisions that shaped businesses, and attended meetings where her opinion carried weight. But those days had changed after her husband, the CEO, had urged her to take a break from leadership. Instead, she'd chosen to return quietly, to see her company from the ground up, to understand the hearts of the people who worked for them. Grace hadn't come here to be admired. She had come to observe, to learn who truly respected people, and who only respected titles. Every laugh, every sneer, every judgmental glance taught her something valuable, not about herself, but about those around her. And while Clara and the others saw a woman too plain to matter, Grace saw them as they truly were, kind hearts hidden behind masks of insecurity, chasing importance in the wrong places. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she'd watch them with gentle eyes, not angry, just understanding. She knew the world had always mistaken quiet for weakness, but she also knew that storms made the loudest noise before they broke, and she could already feel one coming. Grace had learned long ago that the people who underestimate kindness often end up learning its strength the hard way. For now, she said nothing, choosing to let her silence speak, because deep down, she knew the day was coming when the truth about who she really was would silence every cruel whisper in that office forever. The office was buzzing that morning, louder and more chaotic than usual. The company was preparing for one of its most important meetings of the year, a presentation for potential investors who could change everything for the firm. Everyone was tense, rushing from one desk to another, printing reports, adjusting slides, and double-checking every detail. The air itself seemed thick with anxiety. Even the confident ones, like Clara, felt the weight of the moment. She had been in charge of preparing the main presentation, a task she had bragged about all week. "Don't worry," she had told the team earlier. "I've got this handled." But when the clock ticked closer to showtime, something went horribly wrong. The main file, the one containing weeks of work and data, refused to open. The screen froze, error messages blinking in red. Panic spread through the room like fire. "It's corrupted," Clara gasped, her voice trembling. She clicked again and again, but the file wouldn't respond. Her confident smile vanished, replaced by wide, terrified eyes. People gathered around her desk, whispering in alarm. "What do we do now?" "The investors will be here in 10 minutes. The manager's face turned pale as he muttered something under his breath. Amid the noise, Grace sat quietly at her desk, typing a few last notes. When she noticed the commotion, she stood up and walked over. Her calm presence seemed almost strange in the middle of so much chaos. "What happened?" she asked softly. Clara, too panicked to hide her frustration, snapped, "The file's gone. It's all gone." Grace looked at the screen for a moment, then at Clara. "You saved a copy on the shared drive, right?" Clara shook her head helplessly. "No, it was only on this laptop." The manager buried his face in his hands. Grace hesitated for just a second, then said, "I have a copy." Everyone turned toward her. Clara blinked in disbelief. "You what?" Grace met her eyes and replied calmly, "I made a backup copy 2 days ago, just in case something like this happened." She took a small flash drive from her pocket and walked toward the conference room computer. The entire team followed, stunned into silence. The moment she plugged in the drive, the screen lit up, and there it was. The presentation, complete and flawless. Every graph, every detail, every animation, exactly as it should be. The manager exhaled deeply, muttering, "You just saved us." Even the senior executives who had been pacing nervously stopped and looked at Grace with newfound admiration. "How did you know to do that?" one of them asked. Grace smiled faintly. "I've learned that it's always good to be prepared," she said. Her tone was simple, but her words carried quiet confidence. Clara, standing behind her, felt her cheeks burn with shame. The same woman she had mocked just days ago had just rescued her in front of the entire department. As the investors arrived, the meeting went on flawlessly. The presentation impressed everyone, not only because of its precision, but because of the composure Grace maintained throughout. While others fumbled to take credit, she simply sat back, taking notes, her calm smile never fading. The senior manager made sure to mention her name to the investors, calling her a valuable part of the team. Clara couldn't even look her in the eye. After the meeting ended and applause filled the room, the team surrounded Grace with gratitude and astonishment. "That was incredible," one whispered. Another said, "You saved us." Grace only nodded politely, her humble nature making her glow even brighter. But what none of them knew, not yet, was that this moment was only a small glimpse of who she really was. This wasn't luck or coincidence. Grace had seen crises like this before, on far larger scales, in rooms filled with power and politics. She had learned long ago that true leadership wasn't loud or proud. It was quiet, observant, and prepared. As she unplugged her flash drive and tucked it safely back into her pocket, her expression stayed serene. Around her, everyone cheered and sighed in relief, but deep inside, Grace knew this was only the beginning. The truth about who she really was, and why she was there, was still waiting to come out. And when it did, it would change everything. The air inside the conference room was thick with tension and expectation. The lights dimmed slightly, and the large screen at the front of the room glowed softly with the company's logo. Employees straightened their clothes, adjusted their ties, and fixed their hair, hoping to appear composed when the CEO arrived. The meeting that morning was more than just another presentation. It was the company's biggest evaluation of the year, attended by senior executives, investors, and the man everyone called Mr. Reynolds, the CEO himself. Clara's heart pounded as she whispered to her colleague, "I heard the boss's wife might be visiting soon. Imagine how nervous everyone's going to be." She smoothed her blazer and glanced at Grace, who sat quietly near the back of the room, taking notes as usual. Clara still felt the sting of embarrassment from the previous day when Grace had saved her from disaster. And though she had tried to act indifferent since, guilt lingered in her chest. But as far as she knew, Grace was just another low-level employee, quiet, polite, and harmless. No one in that room suspected that the most powerful person there wasn't the man in charge, but the woman sitting silently in the corner. The doors opened, and the CEO entered with his team of executives. A wave of respect swept through the room as everyone stood to greet him. Mr. Reynolds, tall and composed, walked with confidence that came from years of leadership. His sharp eyes scanned the room, not in arrogance, but in awareness. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of heading straight to the front table as usual, he stopped mid. A smile spread across his face, one so genuine that it startled his assistants. "Well," he said, his voice warm and amused, "I was wondering when you'd stop hiding in my company." The room froze. Every head turned, following his gaze, and his gaze was locked on Grace. Clara's hand fell from her blazer. Someone gasped softly. Grace stood slowly, her calm smile never fading. "I thought it was time to see how things truly run when people don't know who's watching," she said gently. Her tone carried no pride, no superiority, only quiet grace. For a moment, silence ruled the room. No one moved, no one breathed. Clara felt her face drain of color as the truth sank in. Grace, the woman she had laughed at, mocked, and dismissed, was the CEO's wife, and not just his wife. Within the company's history, Grace Reynolds had once been one of its most respected executives, known for her innovative ideas and her belief that success should never come at the cost of kindness. Years ago, she had stepped down from her position after a health scare and quietly supported her husband from behind the scenes. But, recently, she had grown curious about how the company was treating its employees now that she was gone. So, she had chosen to return, not as an executive, not as the boss's wife, but as an ordinary worker, to see the truth without filters. The CEO chuckled softly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the stunned room, "meet my wife, Grace. You've probably heard her name before, but perhaps not from the angle you expected." A nervous laugh rippled through the group, but no one dared to speak. Clara wished she could disappear. Her earlier words echoed in her mind. "You'd think she's never worked in an office before." Shame burned in her chest like fire. Grace, however, showed no sign of resentment. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of everyone present with calm understanding. "I wasn't here to judge," she said softly. "I was here to see how we treat one another when we think no one important is looking." Her words hung in the air like quiet thunder. They struck deeper than anger could. The executives shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their smallest actions, their whispers, their laughter, their tone with the staff, had been seen by someone who understood exactly what kind of company culture they had built. But Grace's expression remained kind, not cruel. She wasn't here to embarrass anyone. She was here to remind them of something simple: humanity. As the meeting continued, everyone listened more carefully than ever before. Clara could barely focus, her heart heavy with regret. She finally understood why Grace's silence had carried so much power, because it came from strength, not weakness. Grace had walked among them not to test their skills, but to reveal their character. And as the truth settled into the hearts of everyone in that room, they realized they had learned something far more valuable than business strategy. They had learned the weight of kindness, the cost of pride, and the quiet strength of a woman who never needed a title to command respect. The room still felt heavy from the truth that had been revealed the day before. Everyone was quieter, moving with care, as though the air itself demanded reflection. Clara sat at her desk, staring at her monitor, but seeing nothing. Her mind replayed every cruel word she had said to Grace, every laugh, every whisper, every look that had cut deeper than she realized. When Grace entered the office, no one spoke. Her presence carried both grace and quiet strength. She didn't walk like a boss, or even like someone seeking acknowledgement. She simply carried herself with the peace of someone who knew her own worth. Clara stood, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Reynolds? Grace," she stammered. I'm so sorry." Tears welled in her eyes, her pride crumbling into guilt. "I didn't know who you were." Grace paused, meeting her gaze with calm kindness. "That's the point, Clara," she said softly. "We all show who we are when we think no one's watching." The words struck deep, not as punishment, but as truth, a truth that lingered in the room like a gentle echo. Everyone expected Grace to be angry, to demand consequences for the disrespect she'd endured, but instead, she did something unexpected. She smiled faintly and said, "We can't undo our mistakes, but we can choose what we do next." Then she looked at Clara and continued, "You've got potential. You're confident, you're outspoken. Those are strengths, but it's time you used them to lift others instead of pushing them down. I want you to lead the new community outreach project. It's about helping underprivileged families. I think you'll learn a lot from it." Clara blinked in shock. This was not the humiliation she had feared. This was forgiveness, and it hurt more, in the best possible way. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears, realizing that Grace wasn't just teaching her a lesson. She was giving her a second chance to become better. Over the next few weeks, the office began to change. It started subtly. People began saying thank you more often, holding doors, sharing credit, helping each other without being asked. The tone of conversations softened, laughter felt warmer, and the walls that once echoed with gossip now carried genuine teamwork. Grace continued, working quietly among them, not as a superior, but as an example. She joined group meetings, asked for opinions, and treated everyone from interns to managers with equal respect. Her humility made even the most stubborn employees rethink their behavior. Clara, now leading the outreach program, found herself transformed. She spent weekends visiting community centers, listening to people's stories, and realizing how much she had taken for granted. When she returned to the office each Monday, her tone had changed, softer, more thoughtful, more human. Months passed, and Grace's influence shaped the company's culture in ways no policy or leadership manual ever could. When she finally decided to step back again, she gathered the staff one morning. "This place doesn't need me to watch over it," she said, her voice steady and kind. "It just needs people who remember that respect and kindness are worth more than titles." The staff stood in silence, their faces filled with admiration and gratitude. Even the CEO, standing quietly at the back, looked at her with pride, not as his wife, but as the woman who had reminded everyone why they started this company in the first place. From that day on, Grace was never forgotten. People spoke of her not because of her position or her connection to power, but because of what she represented. She was proof that leadership didn't come from authority, it came from character. And though she left the office once again, her presence lingered. Her words, "We all show who we are when we think no one's watching," became part of the company's core values. Printed on the wall near the entrance, Every new employee who walked through those doors read it, not realizing that it had come from a quiet woman who once sat among them, unnoticed, yet changed everything. Grace's lesson lived on, a reminder that true worth can never be worn. It must be shown through heart, humility, and how we treat others when no one else is looking.